Single dad didn't see his daughter for 18 years. Then Steve Harvey said, turn around like this video and subscribe so stories like this reach more people. There was a time when a father's love was considered enough. When a man who showed up every single day, who packed the lunches, braided the hair, dried the tears, and stayed up late checking the homework, was considered the most important person in a child's life. But what happened to Raymond Ellison on a regular Tuesday afternoon inside the Family Feud studio in Atlanta, Georgia, would remind every single person watching that love, real love, the kind that endures years of silence and heartbreak, never truly dies. Steve Harvey has been doing this for a long time. Decades of game shows, decades of families laughing and winning and losing on national television. He thought he had seen it all. He hadn't. Because on this particular Tuesday, a 54-year-old truck driver from Birmingham, Alabama, walked onto that stage carrying 18 years of grief in the lines of his face and the quiet way he smiled, like a man who had learned to be happy for others even when his own happiness had a hole in it the size of a missing child. And Steve Harvey, the man who has made millions of people laugh, would end up doing something he almost never does on live television. He would cry. This is the story of Raymond Ellison, his daughter Camille, and the shoebox full of letters that never got sent. Stay with me. You are going to want to hear every single word of this. Raymond Ellison was born the second of 5 children in a small house in Bessemer, Alabama, where his father worked the steel mill and his mother cleaned houses on the other side of town. They did not have much, but they had each other, and Raymond's mother, Miss Gloria, made sure her children understood what that meant. Family is the only thing, she used to say, pressing Raymond's face between her warm hands before school. Everything else is just decoration. Raymond carried those words with him his entire life. He got his commercial driver's license at 22 and spent the next 3 decades hauling freight across the southeastern United States, long, lonely stretches of highway through Georgia and Tennessee and the Carolinas. It was not glamorous work, but it was honest, and Raymond was proud of the life he was building. When he was 29, he met Denise Carroll at a church fish fry in Bessemer. She was 26, a dental assistant with a big laugh and a direct way of looking at people that Raymond found both terrifying and irresistible. They married 11 months later. 2 years after the wedding, Camille arrived. Raymond Ellison had not known it was possible to love something so completely the moment you saw it. Camille was born with a full head of dark hair and her grandfather's stubborn chin, and from the very first night, when Raymond sat in the hospital chair holding her while Denise slept, just the two of them awake in the quiet, he understood what his mother had been talking about his whole life. Family is the only thing. He coached her T-ball team. He drove her to ballet at 6 in the morning on Saturdays. He learned how to do box braids by watching YouTube videos because Denise worked night shifts at the dental practice and someone had to get Camille ready for school picture day. He was not perfect. He missed some recitals when the trucking schedule got brutal, and he was not always the most patient man in the room, but he showed up. That was the thing about Raymond Ellison. He always showed up. When Camille was 10 years old, Raymond and Denise's marriage broke apart. It was not dramatic. There was no single catastrophic event. It was the slow erosion that happens when two people grow in different directions and do not realize it until they are standing in the kitchen one evening looking at each other like polite strangers. They divorced on a Thursday in November. Raymond moved into an apartment 15 minutes away and immediately set up a schedule, Camille every Wednesday, every other weekend, half of every school break. He was determined that nothing would change for his daughter. Daddy was still daddy. That did not stop just because the address was different. For 2 years it worked. Then Denise met someone new. His name was Gerald Whitmore, and he was a corporate attorney in Atlanta with a large house in Buckhead and what Raymond described, without bitterness, as a very smooth life. Gerald was not a bad man. Raymond would be the first to tell you that. He was just a man with resources and opportunities that Raymond, hauling freight at 4 in the morning, could not match. Denise and Gerald married and moved to Atlanta. They asked to have Camille full-time, citing the school district, the stability, the 2-parent household. Raymond said no. The court, after reviewing everything, sided with Denise. Camille was 12 years old when she left Birmingham. Raymond remembers the exact moment, standing in the driveway of Denise's old house, watching his daughter climb into the back of Gerald Whitmore's silver SUV. Camille had turned around and pressed her palm flat against the rear window as the car pulled away. Raymond had stood there with his own hand raised until the car was completely out of sight. He drove home. He sat in his apartment. He did not sleep. In the weeks that followed, calls became difficult. Then Gerald got a new number and did not pass it along right away. The email address changed. The attorney said communication would be best coordinated through the proper legal channels. which meant it was slow and formal and nothing like talking to your daughter. By the time Camille was 14, the contact had dried to almost nothing. Raymond hired an attorney he could barely afford and fought for 2 years, eventually exhausting his legal options and his savings simultaneously. He drove to Atlanta twice and stood outside the school like a man who knew he looked strange doing it but could not think of what else to do. He was not a man who gave up, but he was a man who had run out of road. What he did not give up on was writing to her. Every birthday, every Christmas, every milestone he could imagine, first day of high school, what he imagined was her 16th birthday, the year she would have been learning to drive. He wrote to her in a spiral notebook he kept on the kitchen table, then tore out the pages and folded them into envelopes he addressed simply, "Camille Ellison, wherever you are." He put them in a shoe box, a plain brown one from the Payless that had closed on Fifth Avenue. He tied it with a rubber band and kept it on his nightstand. 18 years of letters. 18 years of a father talking to a daughter who could not hear him. Raymond's sister, Beatrice, was the one who convinced him to audition for Family Feud. "Mama always watched this show," Beatrice told him one Sunday after church, somewhere around his 53rd birthday. "She'd have wanted us to do something together, something fun, something normal." Raymond was not sure he remembered what normal felt like, but Beatrice was persistent the way only older sisters can be, and so he agreed. The team was Raymond, Beatrice, 57, a retired postal worker, their cousin Deshawn, 49, who managed a grocery store in Hoover, Deshawn's wife Paula, 46, a preschool teacher, and Raymond's younger brother Marcus, 50, who drove a school bus and had the kind of energy that made strangers immediately comfortable. They submitted the application in February. By April, they had a taping date in Atlanta. What Raymond did not know, what he could not have possibly suspected, was that something had been set in motion 6 months earlier, 300 miles away in a Charlotte, North Carolina apartment, where a 30-year-old woman sat at a laptop with her heart hammering and her hands shaking, typing a message to the production team of Family Feud. Camille Whitmore, she had taken Gerald's last name in high school, a decision she would later say she regretted, was now 30 years old. She was a physical therapist working with veterans at a rehabilitation center in Charlotte. She was quiet and precise and deeply empathetic, the kind of person who remembered every patient's name and noticed when someone was having a hard day. She had thought about her father for 18 years, not always clearly. When she was a teenager, Gerald and her mother had shaped the story in ways that made Raymond seem unreliable, absent by choice, a man who had moved on. Camille had believed it for a while, the way teenagers believe the adults around them because they do not yet have the tools to question the narrative they are handed. But something had always nagged at her. A hand pressed flat against a rear window. A father standing in a driveway with his arm raised. When she was 26, Camille's mother Denise had a health scare, a cardiac event, ultimately minor but frightening enough to shake loose some honesty. Lying in the hospital bed, Denise had told Camille the fuller truth. That Raymond had called. That Raymond had hired a lawyer. That Raymond had shown up at the school. That the distance had not been entirely Raymond's doing. Camille had not spoken to her mother for 8 months after that conversation. She had started searching for her father. She found his trucking company through an internet search. She found Aunt Beatrice on Facebook. And Beatrice, who had been waiting 18 years to take this phone call, answered on the second ring. Beatrice told her about the letters, about the shoe box on the nightstand, about Raymond, who still drove past the old Birmingham elementary school sometimes on his days off, just because it was one of the last places he had a clear memory of walking Camille to the front door. Camille had cried for 2 hours straight. Then she had made a plan. She found the Family Feud application on the show's website and reached out to the production team with a direct email. She explained who she was, who her father was, and what had happened between them. She told them about the shoe box. She told them she wanted to surprise her father on national television, not for the drama of it, but because she wanted the whole world to see what kind of man Raymond Ellison was, a man who wrote letters to a daughter he could not reach for 18 years without ever stopping, without ever deciding it was not worth it. The producers called her back within 48 hours. The plan required Beatrice, who became the inside coordinator. It was Beatrice who steered the conversation toward Family Feud when Raymond mentioned wanting to do something for his birthday week. It was Beatrice who privately coordinated with producers on the timing and the logistics. It was Beatrice who sat next to her brother on the flight to Atlanta knowing exactly what was waiting backstage and had to pretend for 8 hours that she was just excited about the game show. "I am a woman of deep faith," Beatrice would later say. "But I prayed every hour on that plane that I would not accidentally say something, Because I have a big mouth. Everyone in the family knows I have a big mouth. Raymond, for his part, was nervous in the ordinary way, about the game, about the cameras, about whether he would freeze up under the studio lights. He wore a burgundy shirt because Bertress told him it was the most confident color he owned. He polished his shoes the night before in the hotel room, a habit his father had drilled into him decades ago. He had brought the shoe box. He always brought the shoe box. It lived in the passenger seat of his truck during the long hauls, and when he flew, it went in his carry-on bag wrapped in a clean undershirt for padding. He could not have explained it rationally, and he knew that. But the feeling he operated on was simple. What if today is the day? What if I run into her somewhere and I don't have the letters? I cannot let that happen. The box sat in his hotel room that night, rubber band intact, while Raymond slept a few restless hours and dreamed, as he often did, about a little girl pressing her hand against the window of a silver car. On the stage at Family Feud, the Ellison team played well. Marcus, true to form, had the audience laughing within 30 seconds of Steve Harvey meeting him. Deshawn was sharp and fast on the buzzer. Paula guessed refrigerator for something people check when they are bored, which turned out to be the number 3 answer and produced a cheer from their side of the stage that was half celebration and half disbelief. But Steve Harvey kept coming back to Raymond. There was something about this man, quiet where his brother was loud, steady where his cousin was excitable. Steve had done this long enough to recognize the specific stillness of someone who was carrying something heavy, and had been carrying it so long they did not lean under the weight anymore. They had just incorporated it into the way they stood. "Raymond," Steve said during an off-camera moment between rounds, wandering over to the family in the easy way he had. "Tell me something about yourself that nobody in this studio knows." Raymond looked at his shoes for a moment. Then he looked at Steve. "I have a daughter I haven't seen in 18 years, he said, "and I write her a letter every birthday and every Christmas. I don't have anywhere to send them, I just write them anyway." The silence that followed was the kind that does not happen very often in a television studio, which is a place specifically engineered to eliminate silence. "Why do you keep writing them?" Steve asked. "Because she needs to know I never gave up," Raymond said. "Even if she doesn't know yet, even if she never knows. I need it to exist somewhere that I didn't give up." Steve Harvey looked at this man for a long moment. He had been told the plan. He knew exactly what was backstage. He had been prepared. And still, hearing Raymond say those words out loud, he had to look away for a moment and collect himself. "You're a good man, Raymond Ellison," Steve said quietly. "I want you to know that." Raymond nodded, a little embarrassed. "Just a daddy who misses his kid." The third round had just ended when Steve's executive producer walked onto the stage floor, an event so unusual that a murmur moved through the studio audience like wind through tall grass. Cameras that had been tracking the game show board swung around. The competing family on the right side of the stage exchanged glances. Steve took a quiet word from his producer. He nodded slowly. When he turned back to face the studio, the game show host was gone. In his place was just a man. "I need to stop the game for a moment," Steve said. "Something important has come to my attention, and I can't in good conscience just play through it." The audience went completely still. Steve walked across the stage toward Raymond, who stood at the podium looking genuinely confused, his hands loose at his sides the way a man looks when he does not yet know that his life is about to be reorganized. "Raymond," Steve said, "between rounds today you told me something privately. You told me you have a daughter you haven't seen in 18 years, that you write her letters you can't send, that you carry those letters with you everywhere because you always think, what if today is the day?" Raymond's jaw tight. He glanced at Bertress, who had both hands pressed over her mouth. "I'm going to need you to forgive me," Steve said, "for making this public, because you deserve for the whole world to know what I know about you right now." He paused. The studio was breathing collectively as one. "Raymond, your daughter's name is Camille. She's 30 years old. She's a physical therapist in Charlotte, North Carolina, and she works with veterans. She is a good woman. And 6 months ago, she found your sister Bertress online. She learned everything, the lawyer, the drives to Atlanta, every letter in that shoe box. She knows the truth. She has known it for 4 years, and she has been looking for the right way to come to you. She found it." Raymond's hand went to his chest. "Your daughter," Steve said, his voice dropping low, "is standing backstage right now, and she asked me to tell you one thing before she comes out. She said, 'Tell my dad I know, and tell him I'm sorry it took me so long to find my way back.'" Raymond made a sound that was not quite words. His brother Marcus stepped forward and put a hand on his shoulder, steadying him. "Raymond," Steve's voice was barely above a whisper. "Turn around." Raymond turned. Camille Ellison, 30 years old, her father's jawline, her grandmother Miss Gloria's eyes, walked through the stage door. She was not running because she was trying to hold herself together, and if she ran, she would completely fall apart. She was walking with the careful, deliberate steps of someone who has imagined this moment so many times they are afraid of it now that it is real. She was wearing a pale yellow dress and holding something in both hands. It was a shoe box. A plain brown one worn at the corners, tied with a rubber band. Raymond saw the box first, and before his mind fully caught up with what was happening, his body already knew. He crossed the stage in 4 steps and took his daughter into his arms with the total, unconditional force of a man who had been waiting 18 years to do exactly this and had never once stopped believing the moment would come. Camille buried her face in his shoulder. The shoe box was crushed between them. "Daddy," she said. Just that one word, the most important word in the English language at that exact moment in that exact room. Raymond could not speak for a long time. He held his daughter and shook with the force of it, and when he finally managed to form words, they came out broken and true and beautiful. "I never stopped. You hear me? Not one day. I never stopped looking for you. I never stopped writing to you. I never." "I know," Camille said. "Daddy, I know. Aunt Beatrice told me everything. I know." The studio audience had abandoned any pretense of composure. 500 people were crying openly, including the competing family on the right side of the stage, including 3 of the 4 cameramen, and including Steve Harvey, who had walked to the back edge of the stage and stood with his face turned away from the cameras for a solid 60 seconds before he could return. When he did return, he put his arm around both of them for a moment and could not say a word. "Finally, this is why I do this job." Camille, when she had gathered herself enough to speak, held up the shoe box she had been gripping since she walked on stage. "I found this in Aunt Beatrice's car," she said. "She told me he brings it everywhere. I wanted to be the one to carry it out to him." Raymond took the box from her hands. He looked down at it for a long moment, running his thumb along the rubber band. Then he pulled the rubber band off for the first time in 18 years, opened the box, and lifted out an envelope. On the front, in Raymond's careful, deliberate handwriting, "Camille, age 13, happy birthday wherever you are." He held it out to her. Camille took the envelope the way you take something sacred, with both hands, gently, like it might dissolve. She opened it carefully and unfolded the letter inside. She read it to herself first, and whatever it said produced a wave of emotion across her face that moved through her like weather. Then she looked up at her father. "You want me to read it out loud?" He nodded. Her voice was barely steady. "Dear Camille, today you turn 13. I don't know where you're having your birthday. I don't know if it's at a restaurant or a house or a park. But wherever it is, I want you to know there is a man in Birmingham, Alabama, who is thinking about you at this exact moment and is so proud of you that it hurts. You are the best thing I ever did. You are the only thing I ever did that I know without any doubt was exactly right. Don't you ever let anyone tell you that you are not loved, not for one single second. Happy birthday, baby girl. All my love always, Daddy." The studio was silent. The kind of silence that is not empty but full of everyone in that room holding something true. Steve Harvey was openly weeping. He did not try to stop. Once everyone had found their composure, which took considerably longer than anyone had planned for, Steve gathered the Ellison family together along with Camille and stood in the center of the stage. "Camille," he said, "I want to ask you something, and you take all the time you need to answer. What do you want people to take away from what happened today?" Camille thought about it carefully, the way she thought about everything. "I want people to know that it is never too late," she said. "I was so afraid to reach out to my dad. I spent 4 years knowing the truth and being scared of how to come back from it, scared he would be angry, scared he would be hurt, scared that too much time had passed and there was nothing left to hold on to." She looked at her father. There was so much left to hold on to. There were 18 years of letters. There was a man who carried a shoe box across half the country for 18 years just in case. If you are out there right now and there is someone you have lost touch with, a parent, a child, a sibling, a friend, do not let fear make the decision for you. Pick up the phone, send the email, take the drive, because the person on the other end might have a shoe box too. Steve nodded slowly, letting her words settle over the room. Then he turned to Raymond. "And you, Raymond Ellison, what do you want people to understand about what it means to be a father?" Raymond was quiet for a moment, looking at his hands, the truck driver's hands, calloused and strong, that had packed lunches and done box braids and written letters for 18 years. "That it's not a feeling," he said finally. "People say love is a feeling, and it is at the beginning. It hits you like a truck, pardon the expression." The audience laughed softly. "But over time, love is a decision. Every morning you wake up and you decide to still be that person's daddy. You decide to still write the letter even when there's nowhere to send it. You decide to keep the box. You decide to believe that one day the distance will close, even when everything in the world is telling you it won't." He looked at Camille. "I decided every single day for 18 years, and I'd do it again tomorrow." Camille stepped forward and took her father's hand. She did not say anything because she did not need to. Steve had to look away again for a moment. When he looked back, his eyes were wet, but his smile was steady. "I'm going to do something today that is entirely outside the normal rules of this show," he announced to the audience. "Both families are getting the full prize money, no questions asked. But beyond that," he pointed directly at Raymond and Camille, "the Steve Harvey Foundation is going to support this family's ability to spend time together. Because 18 years is a long time, and they have a lot of catching up to do, and money should not be the thing that gets in the way of that." The audience erupted. The competing family, the Walcotts, a warm, boisterous family from Memphis who had been quietly devastated by what they witnessed, came across the stage en masse to embrace the Ellisons. Their grandmother, an 80-year-old woman named Vera, who had been watching everything from her spot at the end of the podium with the focus of someone memorizing a sermon, walked straight up to Raymond and held his face in both her hands. "Your mama raised you right," she told him firmly. "I can tell. A man who writes letters for 18 years was raised by a good woman." "Yes, ma'am," Raymond said. "She was the best." "She's watching today," Vera said. "You can count on that." Raymond pressed the old woman's hands gently before she returned to her family. In the weeks that followed the taping, after the episode aired and the clip moved across the internet with the velocity that genuine emotion always generates, touching people in places they had not expected to be touched, several things happened. Raymond and Camille began talking every day. At first it was stilted and careful, the way conversations are when two people are simultaneously strangers and family. But gradually the strangeness dissolved, replaced by the recognition of the people they had been to each other long ago. Camille learned that her father knew every word to her favorite childhood song because he had sung it to her during the years he had her. Raymond learned that Camille had gone into physical therapy in part because of a memory, hazy but persistent, of her father patiently working on his own injured shoulder after a trucking accident, doing exercises the doctor had prescribed, showing up to his own recovery every day. "I think I always associated taking care of people's bodies with you," Camille told him during one of their early calls. "I didn't know that until I said it just now." Raymond did not say anything for a moment. "Then your grandmother would call that a soul connection. She said some things live in you even when you can't see them." The shoebox was no longer in the passenger seat of Raymond's truck. It was in Camille's apartment in Charlotte on her bookshelf, the rubber band removed and the envelopes arranged in careful order. She read one letter every few days, not rushing, taking them in slowly the way you eat something that nourishes you and you want to make it last. Some of them made her laugh. Raymond's humor was dry and observational, and it surfaced even in letters written to a daughter he could not find. Some of them made her cry so hard she had to put the letter down and step outside for air. All of them made her feel with absolute certainty that she had been loved every single day of her life, even the days she had not known it. Beatrice, for her part, simply said, "I knew it. I knew this day was coming." I told Raymond for 15 years that this story was not over. He would look at me like I was being optimistic for the sake of it. I was being accurate. She was. Marcus, Raymond's younger brother, processed the whole experience with characteristic directness. "I thought I was going on a game show," he told the producers during the post-taping interview. "I did not sign up for the most emotional experience of my adult life. I am a grown man. I cried in front of 500 people. I am choosing to be at peace with that." For Raymond, the change was quieter and deeper. He still drove his routes, Birmingham to Charlotte, Charlotte to Atlanta, the long loops through the Southeast that he had been running for 30 years. But the passenger seat was different now. The shoebox was gone, which should have felt like a loss but did not. It felt like the end of a sentence that had been waiting a very long time for its period. He called Camille from rest stops along the highway. He learned about her patients, her friends, the apartment she had decorated with plants and second-hand furniture and a reading chair by the window. He started learning who she was as an adult, which was its own extraordinary thing, discovering that the little girl you had raised for 12 years had become a person you deeply admired. "She's better than me in every way," Raymond said in the off-camera interview after the taping. "Smarter, more patient, more forgiving than I would have been. She went through everything she went through, and she came out the other side with her heart still open. I don't know where she got that." He paused. "Actually, I think I know where she got it. From Miss Gloria, my mama. Skipped a generation maybe, but it got there." On the stage at Family Feud, before the cameras stopped rolling, Steve Harvey had said his final words directly into the lens. "In 30 years of television, I have been part of a lot of moments. I have seen people win money, I have seen people make each other laugh, I have seen families come together in competition and enjoy. But today I watched a father hold his daughter for the first time in 18 years, and I watched a daughter give her father back the thing that had been taken from him. And I want to tell you something." He looked down for a moment, then back up. The letters are what did it. 18 years of letters to nowhere. That is what love looks like when the road is closed. You keep writing the letter anyway. You keep the box. You do not stop. You do not decide that the silence means it is finished. You decide every single day to keep going. He straightened his jacket. Raymond Ellison kept going, and today he got his daughter back. If that does not remind you of something important, about someone in your life, about a call you have been putting off, about a letter you have been meaning to write, then I don't know what will. He looked at the family one last time. The game is over, but for Raymond and Camille Ellison, everything good is just starting. The cameras stopped. Nobody left for a long time, and the shoebox of letters, all 18 years of them, finally reached the person they were always meant for. Thank you for watching this story all the way to the end. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of someone in your life, or made you want to pick up the phone and call someone you have been meaning to call, then it did exactly what it was supposed to do. Please like this video and subscribe to the channel so more stories like Raymond and Camille's can find the people who need them. Every like tells the algorithm that stories about real love, real sacrifice, and real family deserve to be seen. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. You never know whose shoe box is still waiting to be opened.